every government is also developing, including the United States. They won't admit it right now, but it's true. Listen to me now and hear me later.
Welcome back to the Money Seed Podcast. My guest today is Professor Tonya Evans. Dr. Evans is a professor, a consultant, an entrepreneur, and she's here today to talk about Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, as well as the book that's sitting right behind her called Digital Money Demystified. Dr. Evans, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm always excited to have a conversation, particularly in the financial lane, because even though today we're focused on crypto assets, Bitcoin, my favorite topic, what at the end of the day, it's all about freedom. It's all about really creating the life that you want with a diverse portfolio of assets and what that looks like in the future. So excited to chop it up with you.
So tell us, where did it begin with you and Bitcoin? When was the first time you got really interested in Bitcoin?
Oh, so I'm one of those people because I am a lawyer. I'm a tenured law professor. I am trained to see the risk and mitigate the risk and run in the other direction if need be. Uh, a friend of mine was in a master's program in 2017. Now, when I think about when Bitcoin was first released back in 2009, there's quite a bit of time between when it first launched. Other assets came after that, and my awareness of crypto assets. I'm a non-technologist, so the idea of cryptography and encrypted messaging and all of that was really lost on me. But the one thing that was interested, and the whole magic internet money at the time, no interest. But at the time, there was a lot of discussion of blockchain, not Bitcoin, and really understanding open source software was something that was definitely in my lane, especially because I'm an intellectual property lawyer by training, and most of my courses are at the intersection of intellectual property and new technologies. So in my mind, this was just the newest technology, the most recent iteration and changing of the internet in a more decentralized way. Some of those early promises are probably aspirations about uh, Web 2.0 as we know it, not just receiving information, but actually curating and creating and disseminating information, not just between like a centralized party, but using peer-to-peer technology to exchange information. All of that was really interesting to me because I was starting to get questions through consulting, and certainly wanted to inform my students about what the next wave of lawyers needed to know. They had to be conversant in this language for those who were innovating in what we now call the Web3 space. So that was really my entry point in 2017, trying to understand the intersection between my current expertise and the potential disruptive impact or some of the opportunities in decentralized protocols for the next internet. And then I had a tip. I think you've had others come on and talk about their experience with Bitcoin. There's this magic Alice in Wonderland like moment that happens to some of us where we fall down this unimaginable rabbit hole into a whole new world. And if my mom were on here talking with us, she would remind me that it was during a Christmas break, right after I finished grading exams. I probably was in the same pajamas, but please don't judge me for that. And I came out of the room saying, this is going to revolutionize the world, right? Um, and then shortly thereafter, the dean, I was at Franklin Pierce Law School at the time, I was the associate dean of the law school, and they were looking for someone to go to Thailand, of all places, to talk about one of a number of things. They were talking about Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. It hadn't had the huge boom that we have now, but AR, VR, machine learning, and blockchain, because they wanted to understand the intersection of the very thing that I had been absorbed with for only a few weeks. But evidently, I knew more than folks who were willing to fly me halfway around the world to then train hundreds of lawyers about the potential impact. I ended up going to WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and working with lawyers there as well. So it was a really interesting and kind of natural and authentic way to just, with intellectual curiosity, trying to understand the underlying technology. And then final point is just having to land on and reconcile the intersection, the interrelationship, the integral relationship between a digital asset and blockchain as a means. Blockchain is really just the means of organizing transactional data of this uh, digital currency. So that was kind of my entry point into the space, and then really taking a deep dive and becoming expert where I already had some expertise.
When people talk about investing in anything, they usually think about risks and they think about government regulation, et cetera. Where are we with respect to that? I mean, Bitcoin has been around now for roughly, 10, 15 years. Most Americans have heard about it. I just checked this morning, and it's something like 22% of Americans now own a share of Bitcoin. If someone wants to invest in Bitcoin today, what are some of the risks and what are some of the regulations they need to be aware of?
There are a number of risks around the technology still, as good as, well, let me put it this way, here in 2023, 24, we have much better user interface and user experience with the self-custodied wallets, your ability to manage your own money and finances, much better than when I first started, which was much better than when the OGs entered the space in 2009, 2010, 2011, when they were really making up their own, they had to create their own wallets to hold Bitcoin and then find others who had it to exchange. Really difficult. Now we have, and this is not for, if you are decidedly a Bitcoiner and decidedly 100% self-custody, some of these other things might not be as more of the centralized nature of like a Coinbase, Gemini, all of those centralized exchanges might not be the most exciting thing. But for mass adoption, for people who are not willing to spend time sitting around for hours trying to send transactions from a wallet and understand, with mass adoptions come the need for protection. And so there are some risks around learning. It's a short learning curve, but it's an important one to understand what are the reliable tools that you'll need, where to buy safely and legally, particularly in the United States, because we are geo-fenced from a lot of global exchanges. Oftentimes they will offer it to everybody but the United States. Some of that has to do with regulations. More often than not, it's the regulatory uncertainty in the United States. Because what I say, and it was important for me to dispel this myth in the book, is that we do have laws, we do have rules, we do have regulations. We have the Securities and Exchange Commission dealing with securities. We have the Commodity Futures Trading Commission that deals with commodities. We have Treasury that deals with paying your taxes. We have all sorts of rules, regulations, and laws around fraud. Hashtag Sam Bankman-Fried. He was actually, in terms of a fraudster, under the guise of crypto. It wasn't a crypto scam. It was a fraudster. I don't have to say allegedly now because he was convicted. We're actually just waiting for his sentencing. But that happened in a year because it's actually easier to trace the movement of assets that are in the crypto realm. But that is not to say that we are clear. And so that shifts the focus for business leaders who don't want to run the risk of doing something in good faith and then having it found after the fact to be illegal, unlawful, sanctioned, etc. So there are rules and regulations, but many of those businesses are pushed overseas. And I'm worried about the United States not being a leader in this regard. So that's something that folks have to worry about. That being said, there are some fantastic best-in-class leaders in the space. It makes me think, and I'm not endorsing or anything, but just objectively saying that you have Coinbase that went public last year. So sometimes people even focus on, if they don't want exposure to Bitcoin or other crypto assets directly, thinking about expanding your portfolio to invest in companies that are building in the space, that have a proven track record, that went through all of the bells and whistles to even go public and all of those things. And you'll start to see more of that as well with exchange traded funds, for example. There will be a spot Bitcoin ETF, exchange traded fund, coming online. It's not a matter of if, but when at this point in time. So for all of these reasons, while you have risks around setup, you have some risks around understanding and really fleshing out the rules. If you have a company like a Coinbase operating in the space, they've already jumped through the hoops in order to participate. Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, they're all a Visa, MasterCard, they're all in the space. So when the incumbents come in, it's time to really pay attention.
In terms of Bitcoin, what does mass adoption look like? I mean, you mentioned the term mass adoption a few minutes ago. Some people are really excited about places like Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador, but what does mass adoption look like here in the United States?
It will be the availability in a wider range for people who weren't just on the fringes of financial privacy. I'm a big financial privacy person. That is something that drew me to the space personally, more than just professionally, as I started to build out and teach blockchain, crypto, and law programs at law schools and also online, and also through my own company at Advantage Evans. But it will be almost more ubiquitous. I don't really even want people to think about it all the time, except as an alternative investment opportunity. Cryptocurrency is a bit of a misnomer because in the United States and in many countries around the world that actually tax, crypto assets are taxed as a capital asset. So in addition to operating as a medium of exchange, a unit as account, so that we would think more on the currency side, you also have an asset that in and of itself has extrinsic value and can have a return on investment over time. We certainly have seen that with Bitcoin. If you look on any given day or week, it could be jaw-dropping and heart-stopping, both good and bad. But if you look over time, I remember when I first opened Advantage Evans Academy in 2020, the price of Bitcoin was around 10,000 per coin. Oh, bless the day. And then it shot up to 67,000. A lot of people got in at the top, got wrecked. It pulled back, and necessarily so. But so did my 401k. So did my SEP. So did my 403b. Over on the education side, we have to have a longer view of what that looks like in order to understand the value and why it's important as a part, a small but meaningful part of a larger portfolio. And when you think of mass adoption, when you think of exchange traded funds as being a kind of a de-risked way for people to have some exposure with Bitcoin, and eventually there'll be an Ethereum spot ETF as well. Those are the ways you'll start to have people feel more comfortable with this as a legitimate asset and not something that is a scam, a fraud, a fad, unregulated, untrustworthy, etc.
Some people are concerned that the government views crypto as a threat and that the government might take steps to really limit it or even ban it in some ways. Do you think that's real?
It depends on so China has banned it, but you can't stop Bitcoin. Bitcoin is fully decentralized. It is something that exists and it isn't beholden to a particular border. That is a threat to monetary policy and the reality. I'll even say just the the reality of how we have traditionally viewed money, government issued currency, also known as fiat. There are a lot of wars. There's a lot of money spent, time spent, and bloodshed to protect borders. And money is funded, is used, government issued currency is used to do that. So imagine a world, and we actually don't have to imagine a world where there is a form of currency that you can use globally that isn't beholden to a particular border. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I don't think it's too early to start imagining a world of what is the method of transacting in an intergalactic world. There are more and more efforts to find out what life would be like not on this earth. And with that necessitates the ability to exchange value in a way that we can all come to a common understanding. Our common understanding in the United States is the value of the full faith and credit of the dollar, even though it hasn't been backed by gold for decades. Our credit rating took a ding. We had regional banks failing, where it's kind of like nothing to see here. There is something to see. There's a change and a shift and a concern about the value of the dollar every time we come up against the debt crisis, for example. These are all of great concern. And so, even though clearly USD is the global reserve, there are some countries that are starting to de-risk against the dollar and have other assets. That should be an alarm bell. This is not tinfoil hat moment. This is, we need to be concerned to diversify sufficiently to weather any storm, particularly when there's a seismic shift in the way that we exchange value and what would be the most valuable asset. And so the idea of shutting it down is an impossibility for fully decentralized protocols. You can certainly make it illegal to do so. That doesn't stop it. And I think we've, particularly in the United States, we've moved past that. The government, in my humble opinion, does view Bitcoin and other crypto assets as a threat. It's kind of like a customer service issue in the major way, because really the same technology that the government was bullish on when the internet was in its early development and the need for global interoperability and let's support this innovation because we were exchanging packets of information. Now that information has value, and that's a very different enterprise. It was like, oh, wait a minute. The internet, peer-to-peer technology, cryptography, which has been around forever. Now it's of greater concern because it is a threat to, it gives us an alternative in a private way that certainly is not illegal. Privacy does not mean illegality. And I think that's an important principle that we need to return to as well. I know I said a lot, but there's just so much there in terms of the government's role in protecting citizens, and I get all of that. It's kind of a both and thing for me, but having options is really where freedom and power reside.
And I would say that's what my opinion is as well. Is that the government has kind of moved past that point where they're not going to really fight crypto. I think government right now is thinking more like, yeah, crypto's here to stay. How can we regulate it, make it safe, make it accessible, and how can we live alongside it?
Right. Absolutely. And also
Ago,
keep in mind, one quick thing, every government is also developing, including the United States. They won't admit it right now, but it's true. Listen to me now and hear me later. Central bank digital currencies. We had FedNow release in 2023, which is not a cryptocurrency, but giving access to the central bank level access to an account. Most people, if you're unbanked or underbanked, or you had a bad check in college and now you're on some blacklist somewhere, it makes it difficult, if not impossible, to participate. You have to have a bank account. And oftentimes you have to have a credit card in order to participate meaningfully in the economy. But if you're not banked at the retail level, you're oftentimes out of luck. So having a central bank digital currency in the future could be helpful. The other side of that is there are a lot of financial privacy issues with having something fully digitized and fully tracked by the government. So you definitely want an alternative to that as well. There's some benefits, but there's some cautionary tales around that. CBDCs are very popular in China. It was one of the first countries, if not the first, to launch one. And financial surveillance is a huge problem there. So I just wanted to say that in addition to not outlawing Bitcoin in the United States, for example, there will likely be an alternative form of a digital dollar, a central bank digital currency in the United States in the next, I don't know, let's say 5 years.
So if you're in the camp, it sounds like you're in the CBDC camp where you believe that that's coming, right? And is that something we should embrace, or is that something we should be concerned about?
I think that's also a both and. I understand very much so I think of some of the use cases that make the central bank digital currency model really important to quickly move resources. It makes me think of natural disasters, or it makes me think of the pandemic where people are waiting to receive a literal physical check. Like, I don't even know where my checkbook is. And the idea of sending a physical check to someone, maybe they are experiencing, they're unhoused, or there can be all sorts of reasons why physical dollars, let alone a check, is not going to reach the person in the time needed. So being able to kind of flip a switch, and so much of our money moves digitally anyway, right? You get a direct deposit, you use Zelle, you use Venmo, Cash App, so much of it. I rarely touch cash at this point. So that idea, and as a matter of access and inclusion to the banking system, I think that's important. What I think we have to pay extreme attention to as soon as we start to see those things develop is we want to have the same privacy that comes with physical cash in a digital form. If I gave you $100 today, or $100 bill, as between you and we're not doing anything illegal, that is kind of one of the hallmarks of a democratic system of financial privacy. We lose that in many ways when we move to a fully digitized system. It's kind of the beauty of uh, blockchain, for example, where it's not anonymous, as some people say. It's another myth that I deal with in the book, but pseudonymous. You're identified, and I think identity is a really great use case for this technology too. As an aside, you're identified by a wallet, but not your personal identifiable information, or PII. Um, and that makes it really, really important too. So we have to pay attention to ensure that from a democratic, little d, not in terms of Democrat or Republican, but for a democratic society and the freedom that that brings, that we really do have to focus on matching the best of privacy with inclusion, access, and transparency. So many of the laws that we have are to force transparency into a system that was intentionally opaque. And that's the reason why it's not a neat fit for blockchain to have regulations that would inject the problems that the technology actually removes. That's why you see us fighting so hard. It's like, we don't need all of these rules and regulations because the technology does that. And if it fails and if it does something wrong, we have a catch-all for rules. So that's what it looks like when I think of the cautious optimism around CBDCs and digital dollars and things of that nature.
I really like how you mentioned earlier on this recording that privacy doesn't necessarily mean illegality, right? Just because somebody wants to remain private doesn't mean they're hiding something illegal. And I think that's a very important thing to stress.
Absolutely.
Getting back to Bitcoin briefly, is there anything, do you think, in the Bitcoin protocol that Bitcoin got wrong? Because earlier you mentioned ETH, Ethereum. Are there any other cryptocurrencies that you think are an improvement over Bitcoin? Are there any other cryptocurrencies that excite you?
So great question, because, I don't want to get don't at me as I talk about the extol the virtues of anything other than Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the OG. Bitcoin is hard money. I get all that. But I also am the former chair of the Maker Ecosystems Foundation, which is the Maker DAOs is a major, major part of the Ethereum ecosystem. And I loved that project so much. It was kind of the 2.0 version of the board, the majority of independent board members, ushering it to full decentralization. Ethereum and all of the tokens that the Ethereum virtual machine supports, I think, is a really, really important way to leverage automated performance through smart contracts and a plethora of different projects and protocols that can write their transactions to the Ethereum virtual machine, and so they don't have to have their own blockchain. That supports this robust idea of having a global computer, right? If you think of the Ethereum virtual machine as an operating system that allows all of these decentralized applications to run on top of it, and protocols and programs, excuse me. So I think that's exciting. It's just different. It has a completely different uh, reason of being, raison d'être. I think I remember. I'm not very good at French anymore, but I think that's it. Very different than Satoshi's vision for peer-to-peer cash for Bitcoin. And I would argue you'd have to pry Bitcoin from my cold dead hands. I'm a diamond. I'm a hodler till the day I die, for sure. And so Bitcoin is functioning better now because of the volatility and the potential upside, more of a store of value, more like digital gold. Because, we have 21 million that will only and ever be in circulation. Over 19 million are already in circulation. In 2024, we're coming up against the halving event, which makes it more scarce. At the same time, more people are coming online. At the same time, the ETF will be approved. Like there's going to be a lot of this is not a financial prediction, but there will be a lot going on in 2024 and 2025 that we should pay attention to for Bitcoin. But a rising tide lifts all boats. So it will be interesting to see some of the best and brightest projects on other platforms, either in the Ethereum realm, Sol, so many other areas that even when they take dings, that pushes the technology to evolve or die. So if you see a project or a token or a coin that survives one bear market, let alone two, that's something worth paying attention to because they've likely they had to refine and improve in order to survive. And I think that's really interesting early on with this iteration of the technology.
I think that's super important to mention that, yeah, Bitcoin has now survived at least 3 or 4
That's
bear
right.
cycles. So yeah, it's stuck around. Dr. Evans, as we move to wrap up this fantastic interview, tell us a little bit more about the book that's on the shelf behind you.
This is a really exciting opportunity for me to sit down and really answer the 10 most pressing questions that I received on a regular basis. It's kind of like my frequently asked questions turned into a book that I describe as the book that you either read before you even think about investing, or once you think about investing and maybe you think that this is Bitcoin and other crypto too difficult to use or set up or to understand, only for a certain segment of the population, which is a huge myth that I enjoy dispelling. This idea of this tech bro that's highly financed from Silicon Valley. And there's some element of that, but the uses around the world are really, really impressive. On the continent of Africa and Central and South America, in Switzerland and over in Europe, so many places. So I'm excited about that. And then just separating fact from fiction so that using the best of my name and reputation that is in the middle. I'm not all crypto all the time. Personally, I am, but not professionally. As a lawyer, licensed in 4 states to practice law, as a tenured professor at Penn State Dickinson Law School, I take my position and my voice very seriously. I also worry about the naysayers who say no crypto any of the time. And that causes people to tune out. And you have sensational headlines, you have lazy reporting. There's just so much that finally I was like, you know what? It's difficult to write a crypto book because the technology changes literally hourly. But what I can write is myths that will persist. Too complicated, too difficult, a scam only for criminals, a fad, etc., even bad for the environment. There are greater improvements in that regard than in any other technology. I think they're just more well suited because many of the programmers, the developers, and hardcore folks in the community really care a lot about the environment. And we have to compare apples to apples there. If you're going to compare a global decentralized technology, you have to talk about the energy and fossil fuel consumption of the traditional system globally, not just a country and comparing Bitcoin to a country. That's not apples to apples. So I unpack that a bit as well. And that made it, people can make their own decision, but I want them to do it in an informed way because one of the most exciting parts about learning and growing and teaching in this space is the impediment to participating meaningfully doesn't depend on who you are, what your gender is, who you love, where you live. It none of that matters, but the thing that will keep you out and from having a first mover advantage where really there's a lot of freedom to be made. I won't say money, but a lot of freedom to be acquired comes from your education and a solid platform and foundation on which to learn. That is what's keeping people from participating, not a government, not a corporation, etc. So the mindset shift and this is the book where it's safe to dip your toe in to learn And there's a lot of empowerment because we fear what we don't understand. So this is the opportunity to get some understanding and then take whatever next step makes sense for you.
Very well said. The book is called Digital Money Demystified. I'll put the link into the show notes. Dr. Evans, one final question. Where can people follow you? I know that you're very active on social media.
Yes, in my not so spare time, I'm obsessed with social media and connecting with folks. I'm certainly on the app formerly known as Twitter. I'm kind of making my way into Threads and also Instagram. And you can follow me at IP for intellectual property, IP Prof Evans. And also, head over to my websites. If you want to know more about the book, you can find out all of that information and the companion membership where I have regular updates and master classes and other events at digitalmoneydemystified.com. And then finally, the company, if you're interested in courses, corporate trainings, that would be at advantageevans.com.
Fantastic. I'll put those into the show notes. Dr. Evans, it was an honor to have you on the show today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Money Seat Podcast. Please remember to click like and subscribe. It really helps spread the message to other investors and it helps attract new viewers to the show. We appreciate your support. Thanks very much.